So this week we're starting our Christmas series, and we're entitling it Silent Nights, subtitle Waiting with Expectancy. All right, so traditionally this season, sort of leading into Christmas, is known as Advent. And the word Advent literally means coming. So this season that we're in is a season where we're waiting for the coming of Jesus. Right? We're preparing our hearts and our lives, and we're waiting with expectancy for Jesus to arrive. That's what this Christmas season is all about. It's about waiting. Now, I must confess to you that I totally stink at waiting. All right? I'm not good at waiting at all. In fact, Paul in 1 Corinthians 13, he gives this long descriptor of what love is and what it isn't. And his first line is, love is patient. And every time I hear that, I sort of just cringe because I know, that's not me. I'm not naturally a patient person. I really kind of stink at waiting. So in fact, the last couple of weeks, I sort of did a little audit and kept tabs on all the things that I stink at waiting for. You want to hear? Yeah, of course you do. Yeah, of course you do. Here's some things I noticed that I had a hard time waiting for. I don't like waiting for my toast to get toasty, okay? It just kind of takes too long. In a similar way, I don't like waiting for my coffee maker to brew the coffee. Just give me the fix now, I don't like waiting at red lights. Those are the worst. Especially when you're waiting at a red light and there's no other traffic around. It just feels like a cruel joke, you know what I mean? What's going on here? I don't like waiting in lines of any kind, especially when someone ahead of you doesn't know what they're doing. You know what I mean? They still don't know what they're going to order. It's been 15 minutes. Pull it together. Yep. I don't like waiting for my kids to get their jackets on. In fact, I pretty much realize kids are a huge trigger for me. I don't like waiting for my kids to get ready for bed. I don't like waiting for my kids to get in bed. And I don't like waiting for them to fall asleep once they're in bed. Kids are a huge trigger for me. I don't like waiting on any form of technology, especially if it's not working properly. That pinwheel that goes around and around? That's the worst. I don't like waiting on Amazon to ship my order or for the package to arrive, okay? I don't like waiting for people to respond to my text, especially if the text that I sent them is really funny. Come on. I don't like waiting for pizza to cool down. I literally destroyed my mouth the other night. I could keep going, but the struggle is real. I'm not good at waiting, and I suspect you aren't either, right? Can I get a witness? Yeah? Okay, I'm not alone. Good. I'm not good at waiting, but I'll tell you this, by far, the most difficult thing for me to wait on, more than anything else I just mentioned, is God. I'm just telling you, by far the most difficult waiting I've ever done in my life has been waiting on God to show up, waiting on God to arrive, waiting on God to break through in some way, waiting on God to provide direction, waiting on God to answer a prayer, waiting on God to act or intervene. It's by far the most difficult waiting I've ever done in my life. It's brutally hard to wait on God, really hard. In fact, some people refer to waiting on God as the dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul. Because waiting on God can feel like this black hole of silence. It's why Advent, you got to know this, Advent begins in the dark. We talk about lights in the season, but Advent begins in the dark. Which is why we're entitling this series Silent Nights. Silent because when you're waiting on God, you often can't hear his voice. You can't hear him speaking. That's the silent part. And nights because that's a dark place to be. When you're waiting on God and you can't hear his voice, that's a dark place to be. And I've noticed it often lasts longer than a single day, yeah? So it's not silent night, it's silent nights because these dark places of waiting can last a while. darkness and silence, silent nights. And what I want to talk to you about today is some of the temptations that we face when we're in that place of waiting. Some of the temptations we face. And here's the big idea for those of you that might be taking notes. It's simply this: there is work in the waiting. There's work in the waiting. When you're in an Advent season, when you're in a season of silent nights, that black hole of darkness, you need to know this: there's work to be done in the waiting. Waiting is not this passive thing. It's not this passive resignation where you sort of just sit back and twiddle your thumbs, waiting. It's not a let go and let God kind of a thing. Okay, that's not what waiting is about. It's not passive, it's active. There's work to be done in the waiting. It involves the active work of seeking after God, the active work of attending to God, of depending upon God. It's not passive, it's active. Sometimes the primary work of waiting is to remain still and trust that God is at work even though you can't see it. It's not passive, it's active. And when you lean in, here's what we're going to see today, is when you lean into these Advent seasons, these seasons of silent nights, pressing into Jesus with all of who you are, the result will be incredible personal transformation for you and an amazing kingdom fruit in your life. That will be the result. And we see this illustrated beautifully, I think, in part of the Christmas story. So I want to look today at the story of Zechariah in Luke chapter 1, okay? And I'm going to just kind of sprinkle in some comments as we go to kind of illustrate and hopefully bring this text alive a little bit. Here's what it says. In the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all of the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. But they were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very, very old. So, a couple things to note here. Just notice that Zechariah is a priest. And a priest was sort of a prestigious position, okay? There's some prestige to this. And not only is Zechariah a priest, but he's married to the daughter of a priest who's from the line of Aaron. So both of them are very prestigious people. And it says in this passage that they're blameless in the sight of God. They're righteous. And the emphasis here is not that they're like sinless or morally perfect. That's not what Luke is saying. He's emphasizing that they've been faithful to their relationship and their covenant with Yahweh, okay? They've been walking faithfully with God. And yet, despite they're both priestly and prestigious in their faithfulness, they're without child. And this would have been an incredible source of pain and grief. It always is. I know a few couples who are struggling with infertility right now. Incredibly, incredibly painful stuff. And in this culture, so much of life revolved around, childbearing and rearing. Just a lot. This is basically economically and socially disastrous to not have a child. And here's why. They didn't have senior living, so the parents were reliant upon their kids to provide for their needs and care for them in their old age. So if you didn't have kids, man, you were in a very vulnerable position. So Zechariah and Elizabeth are vulnerable here, and it was socially disastrous because the common perception at this day and age was if you didn't have a child, it was because of God's judgment on you, some sort of sin in your life. So I love this because Luke is going out of his way to say, no sin. These are faithful followers, and yet they were without a child. You need to know, if you're here and you're struggling with infertility, it's not because of some sort of sin in your life. It's not. All right? So this is Zechariah and Elizabeth. They're faithful people, but they don't have a child. And it says this: once when Zechariah's division was on duty and he was serving as a priest before God, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And when the time for the burning of incense came, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. So just note, this would have been a huge deal for Zechariah. There were about 18,000 priests in Israel at this time. They would have been divided into different groups, and each group would have served twice throughout the year. And they would have cast lots to determine who gets to do what when they were serving at the temple, and they believed this was divinely directed. And so Zechariah is chosen by lots to burn incense in the temple, like a once-in-a-lifetime kind of deal. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He will be a joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He is never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah to turn the hearts of parents to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." So Zechariah is burning incense, and all of a sudden this angel appears, and he's freaked out. Have you ever noticed that when angels appear in the Bible, like the response isn't like, "Hey, how you doing?" They're always terrified. I'm just genuinely curious about it. I always assume that angels are like pleasant, maybe nice, bright and dressed nice, but maybe they're really just ugly. You know what I mean? Maybe they're legitimately terrifying. Like, sorry for my appearance, but just calm down, right? So, this angel shows up and gets Zechariah to calm down. He's like, no, I bring good news. You're going to have a child. You guys are going to have a child in your own age. And rather than naming him after you, which is the custom, you're going to name him John. And the name John means Yahweh is gracious. Yahweh is gracious. And there's this double meaning here because God is being gracious to Zechariah and Elizabeth in their old age, but he's also being gracious to the entire nation of Israel because he's going to be a gift to the nation of Israel, their people. There's this double meaning. Yahweh is gracious. Zechariah then asked the angel, "How can I be sure of this? I'm an old man, and my wife is well along in years." The angel said to him, "I am Gabriel, and I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day that all this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time." Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondering why he stayed so long in the temple. When he came out, he could not speak to them. They realized he had seen a vision in the temple, for he kept making signs to them, but remained unable to speak. When his time of service was completed, he returned home. After this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant and for 5 months remained in seclusion. "The Lord has done this for me," she said. "In these days he has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among the people." So Zechariah, after hearing this news, this good news, in his unbelief, he asks for a sign from the angel. "Give me a sign so I can be sure of this." And Gabriel basically responds by saying, "Sure, if you want a sign, I'll give you a sign. You're not going to be able to speak for the next 9 months. There's your sign, buddy." All right? So notice Zechariah goes from this long season of waiting for a child to now another season of waiting to regain his speech. And we're in this series on waiting. We're talking today about how there's work involved in the waiting. There's work to be done. And one of the primary forms of work to be done in a season of waiting is to resist temptation and to maintain trust. One of our primary ways of doing work when you're in a season of silent nights is to resist temptation and to maintain trust in God's faithful activity. And this is no easy task. This is incredibly hard work, and the reason why is because long seasons of waiting can lead to deep doubt in God's activity. When you're in a long season of waiting, it can lead to deep doubt in God's activity. In fact, the longer the season of waiting, the higher the temptation it is to doubt God's faithful activity in your life. The biggest temptation you'll face when you're in an Advent season, a season of silent nights, is that God is not active and will not be faithful to you in your life. Waiting is difficult. Waiting is a place of uncertainty where you don't know what's going to happen. And this is why so many of us, when we're in a season of waiting on God to show up in some way, we basically wish we were omniscient, We wish we knew how things would play out. God, if I just knew what was going to happen, then I would trust you. Then I'd be able to be faithful to you. But seasons of waiting are full of uncertainty. You don't know how things are going to play out, and that's what makes it difficult. And so in our not knowing, we become anxious, and we become fearful, and we worry about things. And we start to do the what if game. Right? What if God doesn't show up? What if God doesn't deliver? What if God doesn't come through? What if I never find the right person? What if I never get married? What if I never find a job? What if I can't find the right job? What if I can't pay my bills? What if I can't afford the home? What if? What if my kids don't turn out right? What if they don't get into college? What if I can't afford college? What if I don't get healed? What if the cancer doesn't go away? What if? Right? And so in this place of uncertainty, we're in the season of waiting on God to act and intervene. All this fear, all this anxiety creeps in, and we begin to do the what if game. God, what if you don't show up? What if you don't come through? What if you don't provide? Now, here's the thing, is that in seasons of waiting, these what-ifs they're like impossible to avoid. You're going to have some what-ifs. That's what makes waiting. You're going to have some what-ifs. The question is, what do you do with these what-ifs? What do you do with your what-ifs when you're in that black hole of silence and it just feels like it's never going to come to an end? What do you do? Well, I want to name this. I want to start by naming what not to do. All right, there's some things you ought not do when you're in a season of silent nights. I want to name 3 ways not to wait when you're in a season of silent nights. 3 ways not to wait when you're in a season of silent nights. Here's the first one: is do not check out. Do not check out. And by check out, I mean give up on God. You see, there's a huge difference between, doubt is part of waiting. When you're in a season of waiting, doubt is normative. It's normal for you to struggle and wrestle and have a hard time remaining faithful and trusting God. That's normal. That's actually a sign that you have faith, not that you lack it. Did you know the name Israel in the Bible means one who wrestles with God? Yeah? So the people of God are they're those who wrestle out their faith with God. So it's normal when you're in a season of waiting to sort of have a hard time. You're wrestling things out. You're trying to remain faithful to Jesus. But see, there's a big difference between struggling with doubt and then shifting to unbelief where you give up on God altogether. You see the difference? See, what can happen in our seasons of waiting is that all this pressure sort of mounts and we shift from doubt to unbelief and we throw in the towel on God altogether. We don't think he'll come through. We give up our faith. And there's stories of this, littered throughout the Bible. One example of this, I think, is Sarah in the book of Genesis was pretty close to this point. Because the story goes, she's kind of overhears someone telling that she's going to have a child in her old age, and she laughs it off because she's reached a point in her life where she simply doesn't believe that God can give her that thing. She went from doubt to unbelief. And this is the first sort of temptation for us in a long season of silent nights. We check out, we bypass the work of waiting, and we give up on God altogether. That's the first thing not to do in a season of silent nights, is to give up on God. Secondly is do not act out, okay? Do not act out. And by act out, I mean come up with your own solutions. So again, what happens in a season of waiting is you're waiting on God, you have all these what ifs, there's this anxiety, and out of that anxiety and worry and concern, you can be tempted to manufacture your own solution to put an end to the waiting. You know what I mean? You're in the season of waiting, so you try to come up with your own solution to get out of the waiting altogether. And again, the Bible's littered with stories like this. Right? This is Abraham. In the same story, God promises he's going to give him a child in his own age, and it's taking a little bit too long. So he's like, I got an idea. I'll hang out with Hagar for a little while, right? And, they produce a child, but it's not the child that God promised. You know what I mean? He took things into his own hands. This is King Saul. There's a story where he has to wait on Samuel, the prophet, to show up and offer a sacrifice. And Samuel's been delayed. He's kind of taken his time. And so Saul is getting really anxious about this. And rather than waiting, he decides to offer the sacrifice on his own to put his waiting to rest. But that's not what God wanted him to do, right? So this is a huge temptation for us when we're in a season of silent nights. We get so tired of the waiting and so anxious and worried that we try to manufacture our own solution to put the waiting to bring it to an end. And we're not to be doing that. So do not check out where you bypass the work of waiting by giving up on God, but don't act out where you try to bypass the work of waiting by coming up with your own solution. And finally, do not try to cash out. Do not try to cash out. Now, this one requires a little bit more explanation. But what I'm getting at here is do not ask God for a down payment on what he's promised you. Okay? What can happen in seasons of waiting is we actually have this intuitive sense of what we're supposed to do, of what it looks like to be faithful, or what God is going to do. And instead of just trusting that and walking things out faithfully, we ask God for a down payment, like a sign ahead of time. God, if you really want me to do this, well, then just give me a sign so that I can be sure. And again, there's tons of stories like this in the Bible. This is Moses. God says, I'm going to use you to bring the people of Israel out of Egypt. And he's like, well, how can I be sure of this? Let me make it clear. This is Gideon with his fleece, right? And this is Zechariah in our story. How can I be sure that you're going to give me a sign? Give me a sign. And then I'll be sure. Then I'll faithfully follow. Then I'll do what you're asking me to do. Then I'll trust you. In the first situation, we bypass the work of waiting by giving up on God altogether. Or we try to bypass the work of waiting by coming up with our own solution. And finally, we can bypass the work of waiting by asking God to give us certainty right now. And none of these are what God wants us to do. I don't want to share something with you. I'll be honest. I'm going to share something with you that I really don't want to share with you. But I sense God asking me to, which isn't fun, you know. I'm in a like Advent season right now. I'm in a season of silent nights right now, like that black hole of silence. I've been here for a while, like a year and a half, and it doesn't really feel like there's an end in sight. Like I feel stuck here. Okay. And it relates to this chronic back pain I've been experiencing. And I was hesitant to share this with you all, really for two reasons. I'll just be honest with you. One, I don't need you to fix me, okay? So what can happen when they hear, like people find, they start like giving me all their medical history and all this advice about what to do. Here's what worked for this person. And like, you're going to come to find out I've tried a lot of things, okay? So usually that doesn't help me. It doesn't help me, okay? The other thing, the other reason why I was hesitant to share is because I want to avoid that like third trimester pregnancy thing. When a woman's in their third trimester, like every interaction it always has a touch point of, well, you're still pregnant. You know, you can relate. Yeah. And so I kind of want to avoid that. Like every time you see me, like, does the back still hurt? You know, I just want to avoid that. Like I don't need to be constantly reminded of it. But I'll give you the story of here's what happened, okay? Here it is. Backstory is I've always enjoyed physical fitness and exercise. I realize some of you don't, but I've always enjoyed it. And it's been the primary outlet for me to deal with stress and like blow off steam and clear my head. And it's just been my outlet. Throughout college and grad school, like I pretty much ran every day. That's my primary outlet to kind of get through the challenges of life. And so a couple years ago, I was introduced to the sport of CrossFit. And I instantly fell in love with it. Like, you know this, I'm an intense person. And so I loved the intensity of it. I also loved just the combination of cardio and weightlifting and gymnastics. Like, I just loved it. I fell in love with it instantly. I was introduced to CrossFit during a season of my life where I was experiencing a tremendous amount of stress. And so I'm just going to confess to you, this became the way that I dealt with my stress. I became like addicted to this sport to deal with the constant stress in my life. And because it was constant, it meant that I never took a break. Like I was doing CrossFit 6-7 days a week without stopping, which I came to find out that's not a good thing. Okay? So I still remember the moment, still remember the day. I was doing this workout, and I had a lot of weight on this barbell, like well over my body weight, and I go to do this lift, and I instantly felt pain in my lower back. We're in the middle of a workout, though, so do you think I stopped? No way. I'm not a quitter, you know what I mean? So I get through this workout and go home, and the next morning I wake up, and I'm just like miserable and a lot of pain. But you got to remember, the stress isn't turning off. So like I continue to work out. And I've still got this pain, and so I'm working out, I'm doing CrossFit, but I'm trying to figure out what's going on here to turn down the pain. I'm doing dry needling, which is no fun at all, and I'm seeing a chiropractor, and I'm rolling, and so I'm doing all this mobility stuff, and it's not getting better. And so I'm working out, trying to get through the pain, turning it off, and finally it catches up to me. I spent an entire night, didn't sleep a wink, writhing and shaking in pain. And my wife Josie is like, we got to take you in. We got to take you in. So I end up at the spine center off 94, and they do an MRI, L4, L5 disc bulge. That's the problem. So then, as part of my treatment, I go to physical therapy. Like, you've got to rebuild your back here. And I meet with he's an amazing physical therapist, and we're talking, and I'll never forget our first interaction. He goes, "Hey, do you know why you got this injury?" And I'm like, "Well, I messed up this lift." He goes, "No, I'm watching your form. Your form is dialed in. It's because you haven't rested. I'm looking at a body that has done a year's worth of CrossFit without rest. This is an overuse injury." He's like, "But I'll give you 12 to 16 weeks and we'll get you back in the gym." So he gives me this little regimen, and I'm doing exactly what he tells me to do every day. I'm doing these glute bridges and planks and, Turkish get-ups, like all this stuff. And I don't miss a day, and 16 weeks goes by, which felt like an eternity, and I'm still in debilitating pain. And so then people convince me, "Oh, you should get a cortisone shot, and kind of turn off the pain." So I try a cortisone shot in my lower back. And it worked a little bit, it definitely turned it down, but those suckers wear off. They're not really all that helpful. It wasn't all that helpful. So I'm back in pain, and I'm now seeing a chiropractor, and I'm doing nothing. I'm in full rest mode for 3 months, doing acupuncture and all these things. Most recently, I did this treatment called prolotherapy. And basically what they do is your body responds to chronic pain different than acute pain. So what they do is they inject the places where you're feeling pain with like this saline solution, and it prompts an inflammatory response to sort of trick your body into flooding it with acute resources, right? So I'm talking like 50 injections in my lower back, and so that's where I am right now. But I got to tell you, like I'm still stuck in this prison of pain. I'm still stuck there. Like, I wake up and I'm in pain in the morning. If I stand too long, I'm in pain. If I sit too long, I'm in pain. It's still a chronic thing. And I don't know if it will come to an end. And there's not a single area of my life that it hasn't affected. I've got 3 boys. I used to, win when I wrestled with them. Now I can't wrestle at all. You know what I mean? There's things I can't do around the house anymore. A good thing I've got boys and a wife who does CrossFit because they can do the shoveling. You know what I mean? But it's like this, it's kind of humiliating. You know what I mean? I'm dependent on other people to do things that I'd normally be able to do. And the primary outlet that gave me stress relief is no longer there. You guys following this? By far the hardest thing has been trying to figure out why I'm still struggling. Like, God, where is your activity in this? Why am I still struggling with this? Why haven't you brought healing yet? Because I know you could fix it instantly. Like, I believe you're capable of that. I know you can do it. And it's not for a lack of effort. Like, I've tried all these different things, you know what I mean, to try to bring about physical healing. It's not for a lack of prayer. I've been praying every day. Josie and my kids have been praying. Family and friends have been praying every day. And it's still there. And I'll just confess to you that all these things I've told you not to do when you're in a season of waiting, I've done, okay? I'm just going to tell you that. There's been days when I've wanted to check out on God altogether. Like the pain just becomes so intense. I'm like, you know what? Why even hope for healing? If you're not going to heal me, I just want to give up. I want to throw in the towel. What's the point? There's other times, by far, I'll tell you the most common thing for me is to try to conjure up my own solution. But see, there's a difference between going and getting help to receive God's healing and trying to heal yourself on your own apart from God. Is this making sense? And I've done both. There have been times when I've wanted to cash out. God, just let me know that healing is somewhere in the future and I'll be fine. I'll endure until we get there. Just give me a sign. Just help me know that it's going to be okay. And that hasn't happened either. So here I am. It stinks. It's a black hole of silence. And it often feels hopeless, right? Over and over and over again, though, I've sensed God inviting me to assume a specific posture. And that posture is the same one that God invites Zechariah into. And that posture is not one of, checking out, where I give up on God altogether, or acting out, healing myself, or cashing out, looking for some sign that everything's going to be okay. Over and over, I've sensed God asking me simply to lean in, to press into his presence. Because when you're in a season of darkness and waiting, all sorts of stuff starts to bubble up that you didn't know was there. And I've sensed God saying, press into my presence and bring that junk that bubbles up to my feet. Leaning in involves resisting temptation by maintaining trust in God's faithful activity. Leaning in involves resisting temptation by maintaining trust in God's faithful activity. And this is exactly what we see Zechariah doing in our story. When it was time for Elizabeth to have her baby, she gave birth to a son. Her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord had shown her great mercy, and they shared her joy. On the 8th day, they came to circumcise the child, and they were going to name him after his father, Zechariah. But his mother spoke up and said, "No, he is to be called John." They said to her, "There's no one among your relatives who has that name." Then they made signs to his father to find out what he would like to name the child. He asked for a writing tablet, and to everyone's astonishment, he wrote, "His name is John." Immediately his mouth was opened and his tongue set free, and he began to speak, praising God. All the neighbors were filled with awe, and throughout the hill country of Judea, people were talking about all these things. Everyone who heard this wondered about it, asking, "What then is this child going to be?" For the Lord's hand was with him. His father Zechariah was filled with the Holy Spirit and prophesied, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel." Remember, Zechariah is serving at the temple. This angel shows up and gives him this great news that, you're going to have a child in your old age. Zechariah, in his unbelief, asks for a down payment, a sign from God. And the angel responds by saying, "Okay, if you want a sign, here's your sign. You're going to be mute. You're not going to be able to speak for the next 9 months." And so for 9 months, Zechariah is in the season of waiting to regain his speech. And it's clear that he had been pressing into God the entire time, because the next time we see Zechariah, he's obediently naming his son John rather than after himself, which was the tradition. He names him John out of faithfulness to God. His mouth is opened, and the first words are praise and thanksgiving to God. In fact, the rest of Luke 1 is just Zechariah praising God with this song. It's amazing. As Zechariah leans into God during this season of waiting, he's deeply transformed. Waiting is a place of deep personal transformation when we lean into Jesus. Deep transformation. Rather than, checking out and you give up on God altogether because you're disappointed or uncertain. Rather than acting out on your own, trying to bring your own solution about. Rather than asking for a down payment, some sort of sign. God invites us simply to press into him, to lean in, And yes, there's going to be struggles and challenges, and all this junk will bubble up when you're in a season of waiting. But the key is to press into Jesus and bring that junk to his feet so that he can beautifully transform you and produce kingdom fruit. This is what it's all about. This is what Advent is about. Amen? Here's your homework as you head into this week. Okay? Number one, what's one area where you are waiting on God? You know what I mean? Could be a big thing, could be a small thing, but just what's one area where you sense you're kind of waiting on God? What is the biggest temptation for you in waiting? Really helpful to know what it is. Is it checking out, giving up on God? Is it acting out, coming up with your own solutions? Or is it asking for some sort of sign to give you reassurance? And how is God inviting you to resist that temptation and maintain trust in his faithful activity? Bring back a story next week. Yeah? All right. Remember to be praying and thinking about who to invite to Christmas this year. We got more invite cards out in the foyer. You can also stop by and have your picture taken as a family. We got a Polaroid camera, and then you throw the picture up on the tree. We'd love to fill that tree up with pictures of our community. All right? Let's stand for closing prayer. Father God, we confess that we do not like waiting at all. I declare waiting stinks. But God, we also know that there's an invitation and opportunity in seasons of waiting, that you want to meet us in our waiting to transform us personally and bring about amazing kingdom fruit in and through us. And so I pray that individually and collectively we would learn how to wait faithfully for you to do the work. And that we wouldn't sit back passively, but we would actively press into you, trusting you with all things. For we ask this in Jesus' name, and all God's people said, Amen.